Hi everybody, got a viewer question I'm going to answer about string gauges and Banjitar. Stand by. Hi everybody, thanks for tuning into the channel. I'm going to do a Banjitar video tonight. I'm going to answer a question that a viewer posted on one of my videos about how to get a better sound out of your Banjitar. I started playing Banjitar about 10 years ago. I was a sideman for a guy who was a singer-songwriter, and he was a fine guitarist in his own right. And so I switched over to Banjitar just for a different texture, and it really it was a fun thing to do. And so I've been messing around with Banjitar ever since. I've been exploring different types of strings and string gauges in order to see what gives the best sound. And I was trying to get something that was a more banjo-like sound. When you buy one of these, they come strung up with like light gauge bronze wound strings in most cases, like you have on an acoustic guitar, because they want to make it feel familiar to an acoustic guitarist. Problem is that those low strings are outside the traditional banjo's range. The lowest note on the banjo is basically the D. That's the fourth string on a guitar. So the A and the E string are below its normal range, and it doesn't really sound all that great. They sound kind of, I call it plonky. It's kind of plonk, 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 and I've been looking around at ways to get a better sound out of it. And so one of the first things I discovered was a video by a guy named Banjo Bill, and I'll post a link to his video. You can watch it. He's a cool guy, and I appreciate him kind of sending me on this particular trail to explore. Banjo Bill came up with a tuning for six-string banjo that involved going from low to high. His string gauges were a 17, a 13, and a 10, and a 17, a 13, and a 10. So you just needed three string gauges to do it. And I gave that a try. I took apart a set of Ernie balls that I had or something, and made a kind of a custom set with those. And it did give some pretty interesting results. And I see what he was talking about, that it gets rid of those low notes that kind of go plonk, 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 and it gave it a much more singing banjo-like tone. The banjo responded better, and one of the interesting things was that all the strings were unwound strings, so that gave a consistency of tone that was interesting. However, as I played around with it for a while, and I made a video about that, and I was talking about his tuning and the results I got with it. But as I started exploring around, I wanted to try something different. On a regular five-string banjo, you have this high G string on top, where that comes up to hear that little half string that makes it drives guitar players crazy, especially if you're a finger picker, because you're used to having that be a low note. So I kind of came up with a variation of Banjo Bill's tuning, and it had a couple of string gauge changes. And so that was a 10 up on the very top, a 13, a 17, a 13, a 17, and a 10. The difference in my tuning and Banjo Bill's tuning is I tuned the top string and the bottom string to a unison. So that way, if I was playing a G chord, there would be that sort of high octave kind of effect that you get on the five-string banjo. But it would be movable, because as you finger the note, you could have an A, you could have a D, a B, whatever you wanted to do to finger that note. It was a kind of useful thing. But as I played around with those particular gauges, Banjo Bill's tuning and my variant on it, I just didn't like the inconsistency of tension across the strings. Some were too low, some were too tight, and they sounded pretty good, but it just didn't feel right under my fingers. One day I got the idea. I said, well, there's a thing called Nashville tuning, and I've made a couple of videos on the channel about Nashville tuning. It's also known as high-strung tuning. A lot of studio musicians in Nashville, they would take a set of 12-string guitar strings and take just the high octave pair, note, the string of the pair, and put that on a six-string guitar. And that would give a particular sound that sits in the mix really well. It gives you lots of jangle, lots of high end, but it doesn't have the overwhelming mid-range presence. So that way it leaves room for keyboard, steel guitar, electric guitars, the other things that need to be in a country song mix. So I went out and I bought a set of these. This is the Diodario. They're the EXL 150H. These are nickel wound. Most banjo strings are nickel wound. So that's what I want. You could use these on an electric guitar if you wanted to tune an electric guitar into Nashville tuning. So I got these and threw them onto the instrument just to give it a try. And I was super pleased with the results. As a matter of fact, I didn't want to hear anything else on the Banjitar after I put these on. My experimenting was done. So this is what I've stabilized into. So the string gauges on this set are a 26 wound on the top, an 18, a 12, a 9, a 14, and a 10. Now the string gauging here is very light, very consistent. So for strumming, it sounds great, but for fingerstyle, it gives a great sound, a nice consistent feel, a nice smooth tone all over in every register. The 26 is the only wound string of the bunch, and it provides a good and what it's tuned an octave above the regular E string on a guitar. Now, one thing I do with this, and you wouldn't have to do this because it is possible to tune this set all the way up to full pitch. I play along with 12 string on my recordings, and my 12 strings I've tuned down. Also, another consideration I have is that this third string, which is the octave string on a 12 string set, that's a 9. You think if you buy like an electric guitar set, a 9 for like a regular standard like extra light set, that's your E string. When you tune this up to a G, that's a minor third higher. On the 12 string guitar, that gauge pops constantly. It's easy, that's the string that breaks all the time. So to save some of the tension and to save string breakage, I tune this whole thing down one whole step. So my tuning is actually D, G, C, F, A, D, which is a standard tuning, everything lowered one whole step. And then I just use a capo if I'm going to play along with somebody. So this gets me in standard tuning now. If I just roll this off, I can play along with my 12 string pieces, which are tuned a whole step down. It works great, but the tension, the feel is just really good. Another reason for tuning down is that the neck is on this particular instrument is 26.5 inches. That's at least an inch longer than most electric or acoustic guitars. That's more string tension, and you're trying to tune that G high octave, that 9 up to a high G. It really is it's hard to not break it from time to time. So by tuning down, I never get string breakage, and it works great. So that was the Diodario set, and so that's what I have settled with to use ever since then. However, let's go through it just in case you're interested in trying out some of these gauges. Banjo Bill's tuning. Standard tuning, but octaves above, okay? A 17, a 13, and a 10, a 17, and a 13, and a 10. The alternate of that one, the variation that I came up with his, was to having the high octave on the top, which matched the high E string. So I had two high E strings, one on each end. That was a 10, a 13, and a 17, and a 13, 17, and a 10. And the nice thing I like about the Diodario, the Nashville tuning ones, is that I can just buy them in sets. I don't have to go try and match or get strings and singles from the music store. I can just go into Amazon and buy these, and they're pretty cheap. And they're like $6 a set. And I just stock them up and just keep them in the drawer whenever I need to change. So I keep this one and one other Banjitar in Nashville tuning. And then I have one other Banjitar that I use that I just put like a extra light acoustic string on, and that one has the low end, and I play that for certain kinds of things, mostly sort of quasi-classical, almost Baroque sounding things. It sounds like more like a lute or a Renaissance instrument than it does a Banjitar. And then I have my 12-string Banjitar, and the 12-string Banjitar is really weird, and I got a video about that on the channel. It's tuned in double Nashville tuning. In other words, took the Nashville tuning sets, two of them, put them on the 12 string. So I have the octave pairs in Nashville tuning. They're doubled up. It sounds amazing. Really good. Now, if you want to hear some of the Banjitar music I do, you can hear me play sideman to myself on my new 12-string instrumental album, Shades of Gray, and I double a lot of the songs there, and I have Banjitar parts all throughout that for some additional textures. So you might want to check that out. That's downloadable from Spotify, from Apple Music, iTunes, and a bunch of others. It's out there now, and you can stream that or download that at your convenience. You can also find it on my website and purchase it from there, GregoryDWest.com, and also on BandLab.com. Well, thanks for watching the video, and if you stuck around this long, I appreciate you, and make sure you like, subscribe, and share. I always should say that at the beginning, but I always forget. Catch you next time, and keep on picking. Have fun. Bye.